to say. The other thing that I'm really bad about, so I'll remind all of you, is when you do speak, please state your name, just so that that will be part of the record and everyone will know for sure who said whatever. Angelica, could you go ahead and do the roll call and certification of quorum?
Yes, ma'am. Looks like Ms. Bryant just popped on. Chevelle Bryant.
Morning.
Present. Good morning.
Dr. Ana Maria Montanez.
Good morning. Present.
Dr. Kristen Culp.
Present.
Elizabeth Sterling. Stacy Poteet.
Present.
Sharice Andrews.
Present. Good morning.
Shauna Jackson. Did I lose her? Okay. And Judica Mehta.
Present.
And I apologize, Presiding Officer Sherry San Cyprian.
Present.
You have a quorum.
Thank you. And now we'll call on Chris Funderburg to do the open government training. We do have some new folks, or relatively new folks. So Chris.
Thank you. Chairman, board members, let me pull up the PowerPoint real quick. Let me know if this is readable, if we can read this.
Yes.
All right. So thank you, Presiding Officer, Chair San Cyprian, and also to the rest of this board. I'm Assistant General Counsel Chris Funderburg. I'll be going through the open government training the department is required to give to the board members every year. This training covers 3 statutes, and each requires transparency in government and public participation. The statutory mandates impact the function of each advisory board associated with TDLR, hence this presentation. This first statute we'll discuss is the Open Meetings Act. While it's important to be familiar with all 3 statutes and their purpose, the Open Meetings Act is most relevant to your duties as members of the Speech Language Pathology Advisory Board, so that's the focus of our presentation. The second statute is the Administrative Procedures Act, also called the APA, and the third is the Public Information Act, or the Open Records Act. We'll start with the Open Meetings Act in Chapter 551 of the Government Code, or the OMA. It requires that meetings of government bodies be open to the public, and there has to be notice ahead of time to let the public know what the meeting will be about and where and when it will convene. The courts have held that the provisions in the Open Meeting Act are mandatory, and they're to be liberally construed in favor of this policy of open government. There are 3 key terms associated with the Open Meetings Act: quorum, deliberation, alternatively discussions, and meetings. Start with quorum. A quorum is a majority of the members of the advisory board as fixed by statute or rule. A quorum of a governmental body, including an advisory board or committee, must meet in order to take official action. The next concept is deliberation, or alternatively discussion. Deliberation means a verbal or written exchange among a quorum of a governmental body or between a quorum of a governmental body and another person, considering an issue within the jurisdiction of the governmental body. The next concept is meeting. A meeting occurs anytime a quorum of a governmental body engages in deliberation regarding public meeting or public business or public policy over which the governmental body has supervision or control, or any time the body takes formal action. If the governing body takes formal action, which requires a quorum, or if the quorum engages in deliberation, either occurrence is classified as a meeting. Once that threshold is reached, the notice requirements of the OMA attach. The Act requires advance written notice of the time, date, place, and subject of each meeting held. TDLR provides this notice in the form of an agenda. Notice must be filed with the Texas Secretary of State at least 7 days before a meeting. It must be posted online both by TDLR and the Secretary of State. A board or committee may not engage in just any discussion about a subject not included in the agenda. This is why the board cannot engage with back and forth deliberations with public commentators, as the subject matter of that discussion is a variable and could not be specified in the agenda. And next slide, what about social functions, conventions, and workshops? If a board member engages in a verbal or written exchange about an issue outside the jurisdiction of the governmental body, that is not a deliberation. Thus, the public doesn't have to be notified about the deliberation, and that deliberation doesn't have to be an agenda item. If 5 members of the board meet at a grocery store and discuss the price of eggs, this isn't a meeting that requires notifying the public. Or if during the meeting, the board deliberates on where everyone wants to go for lunch, the lunch discussion doesn't need to be an agenda item. And then a little question and answer. Keeping in mind that a meeting occurs whenever a quorum of a governmental body engages in a discussion about an issue within the governmental body's jurisdiction. Can members ever meet in an informal setting without violating the OMA? And the answer is yes. Members are free to engage in conversation that is incidental to the event. However, the discussions will be subject to the Open Meetings Act if a quorum of members are involved and the members either engage in a discussion or make decisions about a board or committee business or take formal action. So the key points to remember are: always be aware of any situation occurring outside of a properly situated meeting in which a quorum of members is present or engaged in discussion. Do not engage in substantive conversations relating to board or committee business or policy when a quorum is involved and you are outside of an officially noticed and scheduled meeting. And we'll lead into the next section with this: beware the walking quorum. The formation of a quorum isn't limited to a specific time or location. Rather, quorums form through communications between board members. These communications can easily occur outside of a formal board meeting, and the communications can stack up on top of each other, often without the board members realizing it. This reality creates the risk of the walking quorum. A walking quorum occurs when fewer than a quorum of board members engage in a discussion about official business, then communicate these discussions to other members. While fewer than a quorum of members participate in the initial communication, subsequent communications with other members will result in a quorum discussing official business outside of a public meeting. And here's an example. On a 5-member advisory board, 2 members exchange phone calls and emails expressing thoughts on an upcoming rule change and exchange research that they have individually performed regarding the issue. One of the board members subsequently forwards the exchange to another member. Now we've reached now 3 members of the board are engaged in the discussion, and the members have now engaged in a walking quorum by engaging in a small group discussion outside of a properly noticed board meeting. Walking quorums can occur during conference calls, video conferences, hallway discussions, emails, texts, and other new technologies. The walking quorum concept, combined with newer technologies such as X, Facebook, and instant messaging, raised new issues about meeting and compliance with the Open Meetings Act. So the best practices to avoid a walking quorum: members should not meet in small groups, discuss board or committee business, and then communicate those discussions to other members. Send emails or text messages to a quorum of members regarding official business, even if each email is addressed and sent to each member individually, or create posts on social media about board business where likelihood exists that a quorum of members could participate in discussion, or ask a quorum of members even on an individual basis for feedback and comments on board or committee business outside of a public meeting. This is also called polling, which is essentially conducting an informal vote on the issue. Guidelines for open sessions. A board or committee is limited to discussing the specific items on the agenda. During the public comment portion of the meeting, members of the public are given an opportunity to speak, and the presiding officer may set reasonable limits on commenters. A member of the public or any member of the board may raise a subject that has not been included in the agenda. However, discussion of the subject must be limited to a proposal to place the subject on the agenda for a future meeting. Guidelines for open sessions, best practices. To avoid violating the act on the basis of insufficient notice, members should limit discussion to the specific agenda item contained in the posting filed with the Secretary of State. Avoid allowing discussions regarding specific agenda items to wander off course into new issues that have not been properly noticed. Not respond to or discuss issues that are raised during public comment, but which are not on the agenda, and specifically identify items for future agendas and communicate those items to TDLR staff. Now, now the penalties and remedies for Opening Meeting Act violations. These exist at both the civil and criminal level. Any interested person, including the media, may petition the courts to stop actions taken in violation of the Open Meeting Act. The Open Meeting Act also specifically states that an action taken in violation of the act is voidable. And there are also criminal penalties associated with these violations. Members who knowingly participate in a walking quorum or who knowingly participate in a meeting that is closed to the public are subject to misdemeanor criminal penalties. The penalties are a fine of $100 to $500, confinement in county jail for 1 to 6 months, or both. So the best practices: avoid communication that involves a quorum of board or committee members about official business outside of a properly noticed public meeting. And during open meetings, confine discussion to items specifically posted on the agenda. Now, I also briefly want to touch on the concept of work groups. If less than a quorum of members discuss an issue within the jurisdiction of the governmental body and take no formal action, this discussion is not a deliberation. Thus, the OMA requirements do not attach. For example, the board may want to research and analyze a specific issue of interest to their profession within the board's jurisdiction. In that event, the issue may be assigned to a work group comprised of members of the board and department personnel. If the number of board members assigned to the group is less than a quorum, then the work group can meet without triggering the OMA's notice requirements. They do not attach even though the board members are discussing an issue within the jurisdiction of the governmental body. That is, as long as board members assigned to the work group do not share their discussions with other members of the board, because that could result in a walking quorum. That said, the next time the board officially meets, the work group can share the results of their discussion with the other board and work group presentation, as long as it's included in the official agenda. I bring this up because members of this advisory board have been assigned to a licensing work group to assist with the development of the rules package that we'll be presenting near the end of this meeting. Now, we'll move on to the second statute that governs the conduct of this board, the Administrative Procedure Act. The purpose of the Texas Administrative Procedure Act is to establish minimum standards of uniform practice and procedure for state agencies and to provide for public participation and transparency during the rulemaking process. A rule is a statement of general applicability made by a state agency that implements, interprets, or prescribes law and policy, or describes the procedure and practice requirements of state agency. This is distinct from statutory law, which is created by the Texas legislature. A rule excludes a statement regarding only the internal management or organization of a state agency and not affecting private rights and procedures. A rule includes a new rule, an amendment to an existing rule, and the repeal of an existing rule. There are multiple sources for rulemaking, rules mandated by legislative changes made to statutory authority, advisory boards, TDLR staff, the 4-year rule review of all administrative rules that's mandated by the Texas legislature, and by rule petitions by outside interested third parties. Any interested person may, and this is the rule petition, any interested person may submit a petition to the state agency requesting the adoption of a rule. An interested person is anyone who is a Texas resident, a business entity located in Texas, a governmental subdivision in Texas, or a public or private organization that is not a state agency but is located in Texas. This is a reasonably detailed flowchart of the rulemaking process. As you can see, it starts with the rule ID and drafting and ends with the effective date of the rules. We on this chart, we are currently at the first blue square, the first advisory board meeting. The next step will be to, if the board accepts the proposed rules as presented, we will file it with the SOS and post it plain talk, and then publish it in the Texas Register for public comment. The rule review process, typically programs are on a 4-year rule review schedule. We publish a notice of intent to review. The public has 30 days to comment. We review the comments and make a recommendation whether the rule, in this case, Chapter 111, should be readopted or not. The commission reviews the rule filing and then decides whether to want to readopt the rule, and the advisory board presents any comments and may make any recommended changes. This actually just occurred with the Chapter 111. That 4-year review process is now completed. Here's some rulemaking resources in case you want to delve further into this topic. And finally, we get to the Public Information Act. The Public Information Act, or Open Records Act, is intended to allow public access to information about the affairs of government and the official acts of public office officials and employees. The Act makes all documents, records, and other information relating to official business open to the public, with some exceptions. Public information includes any electronic communication created, transmitted, received, or maintained on any device if it is in connected with official agency business. And the act should be construed liberally in favor of granting requests for information. So if it's a close call, the courts have ruled that it should be disclosed. Requests for public information. The public may request copies of public information or request to inspect the information in the offices of the governmental body. Requests must be submitted in writing. A TDLR request must be submitted through our website, which can be TDR Records Center. TDR's turnaround time on open records requests is tight. TDR must respond to the request as soon as possible, but not later than 10 business days after receiving the request. We can't ask why someone wants the records. We can only ask for clarifications. While generally the presumption is that any public record should be disclosed, there are general rules and common exceptions to disclosure. Again, we have a presumption of openness, but certain information is required to be redacted. Examples include date of birth, most email addresses, driver's license, license plates, VIN records, credit card numbers, and any medical records that would be otherwise protected by HIPAA or the Texas Medical Records Privacy Act. And if we want to redact something that's not within these guidelines, an OAG ruling must be sought. If we receive an open records request by an advisory board member, if you receive a written request for records or correspondence that looks like a public information request, please forward it to us, to our advisory board team, and then they'll send it to our open records team. If the GC Open Records team requests information from you as an advisory board member, please respond as soon as possible. The 10-day business deadline replies to all requests, no matter who receives them. And here are some additional resources for on the Public Information Act. I realize that's a lot of information. You may have questions. I'm happy to answer them as best I can. All right, well, hearing none, I will now move on to the next item on the agenda. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Chris. You all in your board packet received the minutes from our previous meeting, which was last February 26th. At this time, I would entertain a motion to approve the minutes.
I second that motion.
I saw, was there I didn't move it, so I'm going to take Dr. Montana's as the motion, and is there a second?
I'll second.
I
I move to
second it.
accept the move.
Lots of seconds.
Oh, goodness. Okay.
I heard Judica Meda first, so
Okay.
we'll.
Thank you, Sherry.
So that's the problem with Zoom, right? All of the squares, and it's hard
I
to
know.
know which one lit up. Any discussion about the minutes? Seeing no discussion, all in favor of approving the minutes of February 2024, please raise your hand.
Sherry, do you mind if I do a roll call vote so I can make sure I get everyone, please?
Oh, that'd be great. Thank you.
Thank you. Chevelle Bryant,
Aye.
Dr. Ana Maria Montanez,
Aye.
Dr. Kristen Culp,
Aye.
Stacy Poteet. Did I lose Miss Poteet? Sharice Andrews,
Aye.
Shauna Jackson, Ms. Jackson, I think you said aye, but I didn't hear you, but I saw your mouth move. Okay. Judica Meda
Aye.
and Presiding Officer Sherry Cyprian.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Thank you. The next item on our agenda is public comment, and the Speech Language Pathologists and Audiologists Advisory Board did not receive any requests for public comment, so we can move ahead. We have staff reports next, and Regina Horton is going to give the report from the licensing division.
Good morning, advisory board members. My name is Regina Horton, and I will be providing you the statistics for the speech language pathology and audiology program. You should have a copy of this report in front of you. And so we have for fiscal year 2025 second quarter, we've issued a total of 173 new licenses, while 2,064 licenses were renewed online, 99%. 2,057 of those licensees renewed online, with total population of 18,742. For our speech interns, we issued a total of 85 licenses. 37 licenses has been renewed, with 36 renewing online, 97%. The total population is at 1,008. For our speech assistants, we have issued a total of 156 new licenses. 461 of those licenses have been renewed with, 460 with 99%, and the total population is at 5,279. For the audiologists, we have issued a total of 12 new licenses, renewed 142. 141 of those were renewed online, and we have a total population of 1,607. We have our audiologist interns. We have issued 2 new licenses. None have renewed, with a total population of 70. And then our audiologist assistants, we have issued 3 new licenses, renewed 4 with 100% renewal online, and that total population is 57. And this concludes my report. Do we have any questions?
No questions for Regina? Great. And
Thank you.
I just received a text from Stacy Petit. Her internet went out and she's trying to get back on. Sometimes we have unstable connections, so she'll try to join us again. The Education and Examination Division, Ari Acevedo.
Good morning, Madam Chair, and good morning, Advisory Board members. My name is Ari Acevedo, and I will be presenting some numbers from the Education and Examination Division. Today, what I have before you are numbers for the jurisprudence examinations. As you can see the entirety of fiscal year 2024. And as of fiscal year 2025, we have numbers through March 31st of 2025. The numbers are somewhat stable. Second quarter, we had 19 audiologists test jurisprudence and 354 speech language pathologists test for jurisprudence.
Any questions for Ari?
If you don't have any questions on the numbers, I do have some updates for you. There is a brand new audit system. It's an automated CE audit process. There have been some rules adopted that allow for the CE audit to occur after the license renewal process. That way, it's meant to be a quicker process for you so that CE review is not delaying any kind of renewal. So E&E's audit and policy team worked very closely with IT to ensure that the project went live on January 1st, 2025. Do you have any questions for me about the audit process?
Ari, one question that we do get asked by licensees is, how are people selected for the audit?
Wonderful question. It is a random selection. So IT does have like a program that randomly selects licensees, individual licensees, and they will get an audit notice sometime after renewal, and they will provide their certificates or any CE documentation at that time. And there are very clear rules on the audit notification that lets you know how to upload those certificates, how to upload your CE documentation to a portal.
Dr. Culp.
I was curious about that too. Is it a 2-year audit of the date of that request from back 2 years, or from your actual license renewal date back 2 years?
Wonderful question. It's for the renewal period. So that 2-year period that the renewal takes place in. So for example, we haven't started auditing speech language pathologists or audiologists yet, but we will at some point during fiscal year 2025. Right now, the first program we did was podiatrists. So we would look at their previous renewal. For example, if someone renewed their license in October of 2024, then we would audit all their CE from October 2022 through October 2024 and make sure that they had the required hours and all of the good requirements in the laws and rules.
And I always forget to say, Sherry Cibrian, one thing that I tend to forget about and licensees do ask about is that we still do allow the rollover of up to 10 hours from the previous cycle. And so people might have gotten extra hours during one cycle and they can store them. Is there any change to that, Ari?
Not in the laws and rules, not that I've seen. I did see that. So we have notes in our automated online system. And if we see a note saying that they have 10 hours rolled over, we will apply those to their audit.
Dr. Culp, do you still have a question?
No, no, I'm good. I'm just like, okay, let's just hope that doesn't happen.
I always forget to put my hand
I've had
down
it
after I
happen.
put
It's
it out.
fine.
Yeah.
I mean, you just make sure you have your stuff. So
That's right. And it's
yeah.
just, you don't have to show it at the time of renewal. You just show it if you're selected for audit. So always hang on to your CE audit documentation.
Any other CE questions for Ari? Thank you for your report.
Thank you.
Next up, the Customer Services Division, Patricia Martinez-Castellan is presenting for them.
Good morning, Advisory Board members. I'm Patricia Martinez-Castellan with Customer Service Division. I'm here to present our statistic reports for fiscal years 2024 and 2025. This is just a breakdown of calls and email contacts that we have received throughout both fiscal years. And as you can see, things have remained pretty consistent. If anybody has any questions.
questions? No. I know you stay busy, especially at certain times of the year with our
Yes, we
people
do.
asking questions. So thank you for the work.
Of course, thank you.
The Enforcement Division, Shauna Almashuk is going to present for them.
Good morning, committee members. My name is Shauna Almashuk. I'm a prosecutor for the Enforcement Division. I'll be presenting the report for you today covering key statistics and case highlights. As you may recall, at the top of you have the division's performance measures. And the next section is the criminal history review for applicants who may have disqualifying criminal history. As you can see, we have had a significant increase in applications with criminal history this year, but that only one resulted in a complaint being opened compared to 4 being open last year, which is good news. The next section details where the Enforcement Division's complaints come from. The top of the next page puts that into a pie graph chart for you. As you can see, more than 3/4 of the complaints come from the consumer. If we jump down to the top of the next page, you can see that the cases closed without disciplinary action seem to fit into the same categories as fiscal year 2024, with insufficient evidence being the leading reason for closing a complaint. The next section details alleged violations at opening, which are the reasons the case is opened initially. And finally, I have added 2 case highlights to your packet to provide an example of complaint cases that were resolved by the department staff, if you care to review that. I'm available to answer any questions that you might have.
Any questions about enforcement? Okay. Moving on to the Compliance Division, Erica Rodriguez.
Hi, good morning, board members and presiding officer. My name is Erica Rodriguez. I'll be providing our compliance staff report for today. I'll begin with our personnel update. We're excited to announce that Steve Eager has been promoted to compliance manager for our health and wellness section. So congrats to Steve. Also, Anna Clark has stepped into a new role as a team lead for our health and wellness section. So a big congratulations to both on their well-deserved promotions. I'll move over to our current projects. We are actively supporting the ongoing 89th legislative session. There were over 8,000 bills that were filed. TDLR is currently tracking about 55 bills out of nearly 600 that could have impacted the agency. 8 bills are directly related to the speech language pathology audiology program. I've provided a link in my report if you are interested in following the updates on the legislation impacting our programs. Also, we have been assisting other divisions with questions and handling daily industry inquiries and emails. And we also completed our 4-year rule review for the speech language pathology audiology program. In regards to the outreach, we are continuing to, TDLR's Health Monitor newsletter was just published February 21st with the next issue coming in June. If you are interested in signing up for the updates, I strongly encourage everyone to sign up for those updates. You'll get a notification when the next edition is going to be coming out. Also, you can find the newsletter on TDLR's main webpage. I provided a link to that also. In regards to recent and upcoming conferences, we did attend the Texas Academy of Audiology Conference and the National Council for State Boards of Examiners Conference in October of 2024. Our Katie Bryce, our Deputy Director of Licensing, is now President-elect of NCSB. So big congratulations to Katie. Also coming up at the end of this week, we will be attending the Texas Speech Language Hearers Association Conference. It's going to be in San Antonio. We'll have a booth set up, so if you want to stop by and say hi, we'll be there. Or if you have any questions, we'll be available to answer those questions. I will also be co-presenting with our presiding officer, Sherry, and our Deputy Director of Licensing, Katie. Also, university presentations. Since December, I've had the opportunity to give 22 presentations, both virtually and in person, to undergrads and grad students across Texas. It's been a joy connecting with future professionals and sharing information about TDLR and their licensing journey. If you would like me to attend any other outreach, please feel free to contact me at the email address provided. This does conclude my report for today. If anyone has any questions, I'm available to answer.
Questions for Erica? Erica, thanks for doing all those university visits. I know it takes a lot of time and you have to travel for some of them, but I think we have better understanding from graduating students when they go through that session and you answer their questions. And sometimes they listen to you more than they listen to us because they see us every day. So I think that's really helpful that you're taking the time to do that.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.
I'll see you in San Antonio.
Yes, ma'am.
Next up, the Executive Office, Deputy Executive Director, Brandy Myers.
Good morning, Presiding Officer and board members. I am Brandy Myers, Deputy Executive Director of Administrative Services. So for the personnel update, since the last time you met, our executive office is full. And so that's really exciting. And we actually have Miss Courtney Arbor here with us today. She is our Executive Director that started on June 1st. And I'm going to turn it over to her to introduce herself.
Good morning. I said hi at the very start of the meeting while a few of you were still trickling in, and I was having trouble with my camera. It looks like it's working right now. I just wanted to say hello. I started as Executive Director in June 1st of 2024, so I'm about to round out a full year at TDLR, which pains me because it was nice to be able to say I was new with all of the many things this agency does. It was easier to say I'm new and now being expected to know everything, which I will never know. Everything. But I wanted to, again, say thank you for being part of our advisory board. We know that you all have full-time lives and work already, and we have so many advisory boards. We really depend on a lot of members of the public and industry to help us to flesh out rule and policy, and we don't take for granted that it's an additional thing for you all to do in your day-to-day. So thank you for your participation. I hope you know we are always willing to, I'm always willing to hear from you. If there's something you'd like to share with me directly, feel free to contact me. And I know our team values your input in these meetings. But please know we have an open door. Happy to work with you and appreciate the time you spend. And I also want to take the moment to say thank you to this great team. I was looking at all the staff reports and I'm always amazed at the volume of work and the timeliness of the efforts that we take, our customer service and enforcement and education. They're a really great team. And so thank you guys. But thank you, Brandy, for the opportunity to say hi.
Thank you, Courtney. The other addition to our executive office is our Deputy Executive Director over our regulatory services. And so Miss Susanna Holt-Catrone started with us October 1st. And so regulatory services includes our enforcement, field inspections, and compliance divisions. So she is over those areas. And she came to us from the Texas Workforce Commission, where she was the Deputy General Counsel overseeing litigation and employment law issues. So she has a vast knowledge, and we're excited to have her also on the team. So the executive office is full, and we're really, really excited about that. Next is the legislative update. And I will say that Eric kind of stole a little bit of my thunder, but that's awesome. That shows that we're all on the same page. So legislatively, we are tracking quite a few bills. This has been a record year for the legislature and what they have filed, which has also equated to a record year for what TDLR is tracking. So I wanted to show you on our website where you can go to check this out. So this is our website. Thank you, Angelica, for sharing this. And you can go down to the TDLR program related bills on the bill tracking. You'll see that our government relations team has broken these up by each of our programs, so you know exactly where to go to find what you want to know about. Of course, with 38 programs, there's a lot on this page. So as you scroll down, we'll get to the speech, language, and pathologists area. And there we go. And so you can see what has been filed, what we're tracking as it relates to your industry. They have hyperlinks, so you can go look at those bills. You can see that if there's a companion bill to each one of them, They're also listed there, like as a for instance, what Angelica is pointing to, House Bill 1838 and Senate Bill 912 are companion bills. So you can go here and find out what's going on with the things that are impacting your with your industry and see where they're at. You can see when you click over here to the Texas Legislature online, you can go here to look at the actual text of the bill. You can see on the actions that, you know, where it's at, if it's been referred to a committee. And so you can track along with us for those things that are impacting your industry. So we've got, I guess, a little bit over a month left of legislative session, and it is humming along. We've got staff over there that are speaking on behalf of the bills and what they do for TDLR and for our licensees. And so, so you can see all of that happening and going on here. So that concludes my update, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for Brandy? Thanks to Brandy and Angelica for showing us that page and how to navigate. I think that's a really good thing just as advisory board members to keep up with what's happening in the legislature and just to know these are the things that might impact us, and just as an individual to be informed, but also as a board member.
And presiding officer, if I may add, when we get through legislative session, once we have another advisory board meeting, we'll come to you with what landed, you know, because it's all, of course, balls up in the air right now. So we'll come to you with that update of where we landed, if there's any action required from the advisory board, whether new rules will be in place and whatnot. Y'all will be obviously involved in that process. So stay tuned.
Great, thank you. Up next, our Chief Prosecutor, John Medlock, is going to talk about the updates that have been made to the enforcement plan. If you're new to the board and haven't taken a look at it, on our website, the enforcement plan is there that goes through the different levels, A, B, C, D, violations, and what the consequences are for those behaviors. I think it's a really clear document for our licensees, and they've made some updates to it. So John?
Thank you, and good morning again. Yeah, my name is John Medlock. I am the Chief Prosecutor for the Enforcement Division, bringing forth to you those updates to the Speech Language Pathologists and Audiologists penalty matrix. Also, just as a reminder that this penalty matrix doesn't create new law. What we generally do is just take what's in the law and put it in plain talk, and kind of, as presiding officer has mentioned there, classify it from level of severity, with Class A being the least severe and Class D being the most severe. So that way he kind of lays out for everyone what the penalties might be if a case is ever brought against you. At the same time, too, it's also a guidance document for our prosecutors so that we can have a level of consistency across our cases when certain violations are being brought before us. We sent this, our updates on this penalty matrix to the work group members for feedback and suggestions and changes that might need to be made and modified with different statutes and rule changes over the past few years. We've done our best to incorporate those changes into the draft. Most of the changes were to update some certain citations for rule changes or statute changes. Others were to wording descriptions within the penalty matrix. Again, we don't lift the text from the law and the rules directly. We try to plain talk it a little bit, because sometimes we know that statute and rule wording can be a little lawyery. So we try to make it in plain talk so people can understand what it is. The biggest change was we added some, we talked about that earlier, some of the CE violations in terms of the audit structure. So we added that into, those are involved in Class C type violations, which would be anywhere from 1,000 to 5,000 and or revocation if those were to come about. So that's kind of in this matrix as an update. Ultimately, what we would ask you guys to do is vote to approve the updates to this penalty matrix and to send it over to the commission and recommending that they adopt the updates to this penalty matrix, so that the prosecutors with cases going forward can use these new updates and these changes at any time in the event that any cases come about. And I'm happy to answer any questions that you guys might have.
Questions for John? several of you helped with that review of the penalty matrix. I appreciate everybody's input. At this time, I would call for a motion to accept the updates and recommend to the commission that this new plan be adopted.
Chevelle Bryant, so moved.
And I see Shauna's trying to so Chevelle Bryant moved, and I see Shauna trying to second. We just can't hear you, but I can read lips. So, any discussion? Discussion? Then, Angelica, you want to do a roll call vote?
Yes. All right. Chevelle Bryant.
Aye.
Dr. Ana Maria Montanez.
Aye.
Dr. Kristen Culp.
Aye.
Stacy Poteet. Thought she was gonna log back in. She was having some difficulties. Sharice Andrews.
Aye.
Shauna Jackson. You're gonna give me a thumbs up if you can hear me. Perfect, thank you. Judica Maida.
Aye.
And presenting
Aye.
officer
Can you hear me?
Sherry
Okay.
Cyprian.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Okay, thank y'all.
Great. Thanks for your presentation. The next item on our agenda is the licensing work group report, and I'm going to present that. So Sherry Cyprian presenting the results of our licensure work group. The licensing work group met twice this summer in July 15th and August 27th to discuss draft rules for our speech language pathology and audiology program. Internal members were Leonard Rivas, Regina Horton, Erica Rodriguez, Mary Hoffman, Chris Funderburg, Katie Bryce, and Wendy Pello. Board members, Sherry Cyprian, Chevelle Bryant, Shauna Jackson, and Stacy Poteet participated. Basically, we were reviewing rules that you're about to hear about in just a minute. The work group made several recommendations for updates to those rules, and the recommendations are intended to clarify the rules and streamline the licensing process, making the application process even smoother for our stakeholders. The draft rules are the next item on our agenda, so there will be an opportunity for you to ask questions about them as they are presented as this next item. And I think Chris Funderburg is going to lead us through the recommended rule changes.
Thank you, presiding officer Cyprian. I knew I was going to do that. So, let me go ahead and first, before I begin, share a kind of an overview of the document, that kind of an overview of the rules themselves, so that you can maybe get a roadmap of where we're going. Excuse me one moment. Of course, technical difficulties. Hopefully you're seeing a Microsoft Word document that has a variety of categories and licenses assigned underneath them. Is that what y'all are seeing?
Yes.
Thank you. Okay. Presiding officer Cyprian, and also the rest of the board, thank you. I'm Assistant General Counsel for Chris Funderburg. The proposed rule package I'm presenting today is extensive and proposes substantial modifications to Texas Administrative Chapter 111, the administrative rules governing speech language pathologists and audiologists. If we went over the entire proposal line by line, we'd be here all day. So I've tried to keep this presentation as high level as I can. There are several sections where modifications we've suggested will benefit from a more in-depth discussion, but as best as we can, we'll try to keep things moving. First, I think it might be useful to show you a summary of the overall changes proposed. The summary identifies 8 broad categories of modification, and under each category is the speech language pathology licenses affected by these modifications. There are some categories of changes like application and eligibility requirements that affect all 6 license classes. Others, such as license terms and renewals, affect only 2 of the 6. The 9th and final category, general requirements, lists subsections where the proposed amendments impact speech language pathology licenses generally. Throughout these, though these rules propose broad changes, there's some consistent themes you'll see throughout, which fall into 3 primary categories. A reduction of reliance on original or certified copies of documents required during the licensing application process, as well as a reduction in the use of forms for interns and assistants. You'll see, for example, speech language pathology intern plan and agreement of supervision forms, report of completed speech language pathology internship forms, several other forms that are probably familiar to you during your practice that we're now pulling. Instead, we're going to be relying on more generalized language that doesn't directly require the use of one of these standardized forms. The second primary category is modifying existing language to better conform with the department's plain language principles, while leaving the underlying duties and responsibilities essentially unchanged. You'll see this shalls are changed to musts, numbers over tens are changed to digits, those kind of changes. And the third broad change is moving the existing rule to a more logical location within the subchapter, or sometimes moving the rule to a new subchapter entirely. The underlying requirements, again, aren't modified, but their location is. Now, those are the three broad categories. There's also multiple sections where there have been substantive changes to the actual requirements imposed on applicants for licensure. So again, I'll make sure to highlight those as we go along. Now, the three categories of proposed modifications occur frequently in these subchapters. Due to the volume of overall changes proposed by these rules, I won't highlight these form reduction plan language modifications unless I think they might be of interest to the board, though I'm happy to answer any questions you might have as they arise. Now, before we begin, please keep in mind, these proposed amendments are the result of literally years of dialogue and discussion between TDLR's compliance, licensing, and education divisions, and the members of this board appointed to assist with the development of these amendments. I bring this up in the hopes of reassuring this board that, despite the substantive changes proposed by this rule package, every modification has been thoroughly reviewed and discussed, both during interdivision meetings within TDLR and during meetings where the department divisions were assisted by the subject matter experts appointed to the speech-language pathology licensing work group, that is, Sherry St-Cyprian, Cheval Bryant, Shauna Jackson, and Stacey Poteet. That said, this presentation's purpose is to ensure that the resulting rules package is acceptable to the entire board. If you see the need to change the amendments proposed, we can and will do so with your guidance. In short, if you see something, please say something. And if you have any questions during this presentation, I'll do my best to answer them as they arise. I'm going to stop sharing this overview document now, and instead I'm going to share the rules presentation that you've been were presented with your document. Excuse me one moment. I converted the PDF to a Word document in order to make sure that any additional annotations that you wanted to make during the presentation, we could just add to the document itself. And hopefully you should be seeing that slowly. There we go. Does everyone see a document that starts with chapter 111, speech language pathologists and audiologists? Okay, we'll begin. So the changes are, there's subchapters, A through, I believe it's, yes, P, so buckle up. But we'll be going through all of these changes in the individual general, the subchapters, which are start with general provisions, move through the different types of licensing of speech language pathology licenses, through the speech language pathology license itself, speech language pathology interns, audiology licenses, audiology assistants, audiology interns, and also, yes, and as we move through them, I'll make sure to point out when we've moved to a different subchapter. So we'll start with subchapter A, general provisions. The major changes here to the definition sections. These proposed rules add, modify, and repeal several definitions, notably supervisor, excuse me, let me scroll down. Notably supervisor responsibility statement form, which is repealed along with the old section 11.51, and assistant supervision plan, which was a concept used heavily and used in the new 111.51. Now, again, I'm due to the length of this document, I'm kind of moving fast, but please let me know if we ever need to slow down or if you have any questions. Subchapter C, the major change here is actually the full repeal of 111.22, the waiver of the written examination requirement. This repeal removed the procedure authorizing waiver of the written examination, and this procedure is not replaced. Moving on to subchapter D. Now we're into the requirements for speech language pathology licenses. In 111.30, the licensing requirements, we have several changes. B1, it specifies that an applicant must have a master's degree in the area of communication science and disorders. B4 specifies that a master's degree in audiology must be received from a college or university's program is accredited by a national accrediting program. into the internship requirements. This proposed modification that requires that the applicant must have completed the internship where supervised professional experience is with a speech language pathologist as per, and we'll get to this section later, 111.41. It also adds an additional option for applicants who've completed the internship under ASHA approved clinical fellowship requirements. And also, you'll see the repeal of former D1 this removes the requirement of licensure under 111.41, and the new out-of-state intern requirements have been moved to, and we'll see this later, section 111.35C6. I'll move. If any questions, I'll pause after each of these individual subsections. Moving on to 111.35. Again, you'll see a variety of form reduction modifications. If we take a look at B, if this rule impacts applicants who hold ASHA CCCs, and it provides the documentation requirements if they are applying for a speech language pathology license with an ASHA CCC. If the ASHA CCC is expired, this rule also provides several alternate means to prove current knowledge. Now, if we move on to C, if the applicant has never held an ASHA CCC, it also provides documentation requirements. It does remove the requirement of the report of completed speech language pathology internship form, as you'll see here in 5. As you see, it's a simplification, no longer requiring on a specific form, but rather just in a form and manner prescribed by the department. And you'll see this throughout these rule package. And if you look, and here in D, former D, we removed a waiver of clinical experience and examination requirements, as I referred to earlier. Again, we're moving on to a new subchapter here, the requirements for internship in speech language pathology license. Any questions so far, or suggestions or modifications? Hearing none. Right now we're into the intern speech language pathology licensing requirements, education and clinical work. We'll just briefly touch here. It's specified in B, we've specified that program and candidacy status are considered accredited. C1 through 6, which is basically left, C1 through 3, programs that are its candidate status are considered conditioned on graduation from a college university with accredited program. And B4, let's see. And master's degree in audiology must be accredited. Now we move down to rule D. As you'll see here, if the applicant earned their clinical education requirements more than 10 years ago, we now provide several options for methods of proving current knowledge. We'll also see a variation on this in 111.50 for assistance in speech language pathology. Moving down to E, internship license. Intern license is available if the degree is not officially conferred and the applicant has completed all educational and clinical requirements and completed it at an accredited institution. Compare this to subsection F, where intern license is not available if the degree is not officially conferred and the applicant completed all educational and clinical requirements at an unaccredited or foreign institution. And also we'll see here in now repealed F repeals the automatic approval of coursework clinical experience upon verification by program director or designee of an accredited college or university. Next is a substantial change, 111.41, the internship and supervision. Former C, it repeals the intern plan and agreement supervision form, and new C delineates the internship supervisor relationship. In general, it removes specific references to the speech language pathology intern plan and agreement of supervision form, and instead specifies the requirements exclusive of any requirements on reliance on forms. While these are, it looks like there have been substantial changes, really, we're just kind of moving words around. A new section E. This disqualifies earned hours earned under out-of-state internships and requires ASHA CCCs if applying with out-of-state internships hours. And we see here in repealed F, or excuse me, in F, removes the extension request option. G, reporting completed internship hours. This is you'll see here. This is the result of several discussions with the speech language pathology licensing work group. We were trying to come up with a way. Well, what if the supervisor? What if the What if the hours accumulated under a supervisor aren't acceptable? Well, how do we record this? How do we make sure that the intern, the supervisee is aware that these hours are going to be deemed unacceptable? 1 through 3 kind of delineates the procedure for making sure everybody is aware of whether the hours are acceptable or not, and then providing them to the department in an acceptable format. I feel like I'm rushing, but please feel free to stop me at any time. Now we are at 111.42. This is the practices and duties of interns. Under A, we see that the licensed intern must obtain supervised professional experience under a department-approved supervisor. If an intern passes the exam and wishes to continue to practice as an intern, they must apply for a speech-language pathologist license within 30 days of passing the exam. And under F2, we see that if an intern can practice under a supervisor's license while awaiting licensure. 1145, application eligibility requirements. We see here in B3 that if the graduate degree has not been conferred and if the graduate program is accredited, then in lieu of a transcript, the subsection authorizes the college or university program director or designate of the. Okay, thank you. 111.47, license term renewals. This clarifies that internships must be completed within 48 months. Only one license may be issued. And if they're not completed within 48 months, the applicant may apply for assistant license. And the rest are just renumbering, etc. Now we're moving to subchapter F. Now is a good time, I guess, to pull, see if anyone has any questions. Otherwise, we'll move into the requirements for an assistant in speech language pathology. So you'll see here that the entirety of 111.50 is new. That's because the prior version of 111.50 has been entirely repealed. I'll go through this in a little detail. Excuse me. So A requires that a license to practice an assistant. B goes into the degree requirements for that licensure. Requires a baccalaureate with emphasis on communication, emphasis on communicative science or disorders. If no baccalaureate baccalaureate with emphasis on communicative science or exists, they can qualify for an assistant on a case-by-case basis. This may include course leveling. Going down to 3, the transcript there's the transcript evaluation for a conferred degree. Moving to 4, if an applicant's transcript is in a language other than English or earned at a foreign university and the bachelor's, and slight footnote, this is several times in this document we say sometimes you say baccalaureate, sometimes we say bachelor's. We're going to the preferred terminology is baccalaureate. There's a couple instances of bachelor's that you may see. We'll be changing those all to baccalaureate before these are hopefully approved by the board and published in the Texas Register. If the applicant's transcript is in a language other than English or earned at a foreign university and a baccalaureate degree has a major in communicative science or disorders, then we're going to need an evaluation form for an ASHA-approved transcript evaluation service. And the applicant will bear all these costs. Go down to 5. The applicant's transcript is in a language other than English or earned at a foreign university and the baccalaureate's degree or greater is not a major in communicative science disorders, we're going to require proof of sufficient academic leveling courses. Moving on to C, the course requirements for licensure, 24 semester credit hours in communicative science or disorders, and then we delineate the specific requirements. These are variations on what have already existed. I don't think there are any surprises here. D, the clinical observation experience, the 25 hours clinical observation and 25 hours of clinical assisting. The hours must be obtained through accredited college or university, and if they're not obtained, they must complete the missing hours while under the supervisor's license. And if they hold an assistant license in another state, we'll see this in D, then they don't have to approve the 25-25. Moving on to E, these are the alternate requirements for an applicant who hasn't met D's requirements. It requires completion of hours under 100% direct supervision. And if there's a change in supervisors, requires completion of the hours under 100% direct supervision. Moving on to F, the requirements if the degree, coursework, or clinical observation experience were earned more than 10 years ago. And G prohibits the assistant from practice until license has been issued and any missing hours are complete. Again, this new 50 replaces the old 50, which was repealed in full. Any questions so far?
Chris, Sherry Sensibrine, not a question, but just to point out, having been part of that work group, a big change for the assistants is while we still have those same requirements that they get their hours under 100% supervision, it removes the need for the clinical deficiency plan, which just added a layer of paperwork and bureaucracy that held people up sometimes. And so they actually could be hired in their new position, and the person who will be their supervisor can do the supervision of those hours that are required. So as opposed to right now where it's happening, some of our people go finish college, they pay someone to help them get those 25 assisting and experience hours, and then they find a job. Now they can just go to their job and get that training. It does put more responsibility, I think, on the place where the person's going to work, and that's supervising SLP. But now the training will be specific to the place where they're going to work. And so in a lot of ways, this will make the process smoother and hopefully better in the long run. We'll see.
Thank you, Madam Chair. That's one of the other reasons I think it's so important that we have a public discussion about these proposed rule changes, because not only does it provide the public with notice about what we're proposing, but it also allows for subject matter experts like yourself to kind of annotate the changes that are being made and provide some context for why we did so. As you can see, as you mentioned in now repealed 7, the clinical deficiency plan is now struck. This concept, under these proposed amendments, this concept would no longer exist, which I think is probably a relief to everyone. Moving on to 111.51, assistant speech language pathology license supervision requirements. Generally, the changes to C require an assistant to practice under assistant supervision plan. Then it provides the plan requirements. Section provides more specific details about the assistant supervision plan. I made a summary of these, but frankly, I don't know if that particular juice is worth a squeeze. If you'd like me to go through them individually, I'm happy to, but I think that the modifications that we made are fairly straightforward. As you can see, we're continuing with our plain language, must to shall, need digits under 10 written out, anything over, strictly rules. Moving on to 5.2, practices and duties of assistants. Down to G. These are specifies the duties that a supervisor may assign. Excuse me, I missed a little here. This specifies the duties that a supervisor may assign to an assistant, including acting as a translator and creating daily notes that here we are, and creating daily notes that do not require supervisor signature and not related to building. These are new additions to the duties that may be assigned. And then we move down to H, which are the G and H, which are title mandates and restrictions on the use of assistant SLP or SLP assistant. .55, assistant application and eligibility requirements. Here in B4, we'll see that it requires an evaluation form from an ASHA-approved transcript evaluation service that confirms the degree is a bachelor or baccalaureate degree or higher if the applicant's transcript is in a language other than English or the degree was earned at a foreign university. The applicant must bear all expenses incurred for the evaluation, and if the degree is not in communicative science, the applicant must also meet the requirements of 111.50B5, which is the rule governing baccalaureate degrees with a major not in communicative sciences or disorders earned at a foreign university. Here in B5, we have form reduction changes and also proof that the applicant completed sufficient communicative sciences disorders academic leveling courses. B6, verification of the 25 hours and 25 by the university program director designee if any hours were earned. And finally, B6, if 25 is not earned, then the missing hours must be earned under direct supervision. We also see here the clinical observation and clinical experience form has been struck, fitting with the overall theme of form reduction. All right, well, here we are at subchapter H, moving right along. Now is a good time, I think, to poll, see if there are any questions or suggestions on what we've presented so far. Hearing none, I'll move on. Again, requirements for audiology licenses. We're here in subsection 70 licensing requirements. You'll see here that the former F has been repealed. This is the repeal of authorization for applicants who previously held a national or ABA certification to have their certification reinstated and apply for licensure. This is no longer a procedure that the department is going to adhere, has to adhere to. 175, application and eligibility requirements. This is not unlike the prior section where we saw, I believe it was 50 that was totally repealed, say kind of a parallel situation here. .75 is totally repealed and a new subsection in its place. B requires applicants for requires excellence with the ASHA CCCs or AB certification in particular. When we look at B3, proof of current knowledge, which may include completing at least 10 hours of continuing education or other courses within the last year or holding a current license in another state. C, the requirements for applicants who never held their ASHA CCCs or ABA certifications. Again, I don't want to overload y'all, so I'm just kind of skimming through this. But again, if you have any specific questions or if you need me to move slower, please let me know. You'll see that D is a fingerprints requirements. E delineates the procedure for an upgrade for an intern license to full license. And F is a 1-year deadline for the completion of all licensing requirements. That deadline begins on the application submission date. Here we are in subsection I, the requirements for an intern in audiology license. B, it makes clear that programs and candidacy statuses are considered accredited. And again, we see some form reduction in the strike through of subsection D. I should point out that part of the form reduction is also reducing reliance on applicants and our licensing division to provide original copies of education and experience. Instead, copies of transcripts are generally going to be accepted in lieu of the actual original documentation. At 81, internship and supervision requirements, this is very similar to 111.51. Generally, we see in here in subsection C, the audit, again, we see a reduction in standardized forms. The audiology intern planning agreement supervision form is now no longer required. Generally, this subsection requires an intern to practice under an intern supervision plan, and then it provides the plan requirements. This subsection provides more specific details about the internship supervision plan, and we see that through subsection C1 through C6. Again, it basically parallels what we've already seen. D is a notable change in internship requirements. Instead of formerly there was a requirement of 1,600 hours of supervised clinical work, that requirement has now been struck. This suggestion was made at during one of our licensing work group meetings, and you'll see that the results of that suggestion here. E has been struck, and again, all the requirement, you see that this is a very form reliant subsection with the repeal of that requirement of a report of completed internship form. This section is now essentially an appendix that can be removed. Moving on to .82. It practices and duties of audiology interns. We see here in A that it clarifies that a licensed intern in audiology must obtain supervised professional experience under the supervision of a licensed audiologist. Move on to 85. We see some form and certification changes, and also B, the repeal of the coursework and clinical experience form for audiology interns to rely on a verification of enrollment and completion by a program director or designee. Moving on to 87, license term renewals. This is again a notable change. An intern and audiology license now valued for 2 years from issuance and may be renewed twice. This is a change from 1 year and renewed annually. All right, subchapter J, requirements for an assistant in audiology license. I'm going to pause for questions if there are any. Hearing none, I'll move on. These are the licensing requirements, education and training requirements for assistants in audiology licenses. These are primarily modifications to provide specific requirements guidance necessitated by the repeal of the supervisory responsibility statement for an assistant in audiology form. This is formally mandated by now repealed 91C. It clarifies that all training hours must be accumulated under the supervision of an approved supervisor, and an assistant may not begin practice until all supervised training hours are complete and the license has been issued, if applicable. And then we have former section C repeals the requirements of the specific forms. Moving on to 91, supervision requirements. Again, the major change is due to us no longer relying on standardized forms, but notably G, excuse me, notably G is reduces the required supervision hours from 10 to 4 hours per week and 40 to 16 hours per month. And G1 also reduces the direct supervision hour requirements from 4 hours to 1 hour per week. Again, you see plain language changes, clarification changes. Now we're at .95, the application eligibility requirements. These are primarily modifications to provide specific guidance necessitated by the repeal of the standardized form. But we see here in B6 that it clarifies that proof of the high school diploma is not needed if an applicant holds a bachelor or baccalaureate degree or higher in communicative sciences or disorders. And those are the primary changes, to these licenses. The rest is more generalized. Here we are in subsection L for dual licenses in speech language pathology and audiology. We see some documentation simplification requirements. We give emphasis on original or certified copies rather than originals, and that the submission is in a form and manner prescribed by the department rather than a specific form. Subchapter P, generally applicable subchapter that applies to all speech language pathology licenses. Now all licensees are required to provide a contact phone number and a valid email address. And moving down to 11.154 supervision requirements. These are mainly plain language modifications, but the existing requirements remain intact. And the consanguinity. This is a pre-existing requirement. It's just been moved to a more logical location. License sanctions, same thing. Supervision requirements, there's been no real changes to these except to provide kind of roadmaps as to what the actual subsection is going to be talking about. And finally, in fees, we see that the initial as the changes that we spoke of earlier, changing the intern and audiology license from a 1 year to a 2 year, but there's been no increase in fees. And amazingly, that is the entirety of the rules package. And again, it's massive changes, and I think that the changes that are being proposed are mainly to make everyone's life easier. I think there's been some common sense changes to the hours that are being required, and also the how long licenses can remain effective, and also deadlines placed on the length of internships. But again, I just want to reemphasize all of this has been the result of continual cooperation with the department's internal divisions and with this advisory board. So I hope that the rules as proposed are acceptable. But if now is a good time, though, if you saw something that you want changed or something that needs to be modified, we're happy to take any suggestions you might have. Well, hearing none, at this time, I would like to ask this board to adopt the rules as proposed for publication in the Texas Register. And I guess
could we have a vote to support that we adopt these rules for publication in the Texas Register?
Yes, we do.
Dr. Montanez, thank you.
Was that a motion? I can second.
Thank you, Kristen. Yes,
okay.
I think that's good for the
Kristen
board
Culp.
to
Yes.
give a second. Thank you, Dr. Culp.
Thank you.
Any discussion? Nothing except to say thank you to Chris for the masterful leading us through that quickly for the mass amount of material we needed to cover. Okay.
It could not have been done without y'all's assistance. So thank you.
And everyone can be assured that it was hours and hours of work, so it wasn't something done quickly. So, Angelica, would you do a roll call vote, please?
Yes, ma'am. Chevelle Bryant.
Aye.
Dr. Ana Maria Montanes,
Aye.
Dr. Kristen Culp,
Aye.
Stacy Botit,
Aye.
Sharice Andrews,
Aye.
Shauna Jackson,
I saw the
Judica
thumbs up.
Maida. Yeah. Judica Maida,
Aye.
and presiding officer Sherry Cyprian.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Great. I think that our licensees are going to be happy with those changes. And just, it makes sense in our rules to use that general terminology, form and manner required by the department. So every time we rename a form, we don't have to change the rules just to catch up. And also, hopefully, more and more things are going to be done even more easily online, and we won't be hamstrung by the wording in our rules. So thank you, everyone, for listening to that and supporting it. I think Chris is actually up again. Hope you had a chance for a drink of water in between.
Yes, hydration is key. Yes.
He's going to talk a little bit about the legislature, our advisory board, and professional associations related to some legislation.
Thank you. Chris Funderburg, General Counsel. So at the last board meeting, this issue was raised about the SPA Interstate Compact. I'm just going to read a quick summary of the function of the SPA Interstate Compact, and this is generally applicable, I think. The Interstate Compact would allow an individual who holds a Texas speech language pathologist license or a Texas audiologist license to apply for a privilege to practice in a state that is a member of the Interstate Compact. It would allow an individual who is licensed in another compact member state to apply for a privilege to practice in Texas. A licensee must comply with the practice laws of the member state in which the client is located at the time the service is provided. The Interstate Compact does not impact a licensee who does not wish to hold a privilege to practice in a member state, essentially a reciprocity agreement with members of the Interstate Compact. I think it would be useful to the board to kind of provide a little legal framework for this discussion. So the Texas legislature is the legislative body that creates the laws, statutory laws that govern the regulatory behavior of Texas administrative agencies. The Texas administrative agencies essentially borrow that statutory authority when our enacting and other governing statutes are passed. We then use that authority to draft administrative rules. We can do administrative rules anytime that we like. The legislature only meets every couple of years, so they're not as responsive. So basically what they do is typically give us a broad-ish grant of authority, then we craft administrative rules that have to stay within the boundaries of the statutory authority that we've been granted. The speech language pathology, the concept proposed by the speech language pathology interstate compact, that we would be able to recognize speech language pathology licenses that have already been recognized by other states as being, acceptable for practice, is not something that currently exists in the statutory law that provides the department with its regulatory authority. If it did, we could craft rules that could maybe allow us to administrate this statutory authority, but without that statutory authority, we can't act. And so that is the case with the SPA Interstate Compact at this stage. We can't, without the statutory authority existing in the enabling statute, we simply cannot recognize this process. I'm going to briefly share the Texas legislature's Texas legislature online. This is hopefully what you're going to see is a website from this legislative session for House Bill 4409. Is that what's showing up on the screen? Yeah. So this is the I'll just pull up the text so you can see it. As you can see, this is the Audiology Speech Language Pathology Interstate Compact. This is essentially what we've been discussing. There's a bit more detail to this bill that's being proposed than what I provided my more generalized explanation at the start of this agenda item. However, it's essentially the same thing. Now, if we take a look at the current history of action on this, we've got weeks left in the legislative session, but it seems to have stopped. If this doesn't, if this fails to be signed by the governor, we can't implement this. And so I think that was the question that was raised at the prior advisory board meeting. Will we be able to do this? Based on what I'm seeing, the answer is no. I mean, perhaps it'll pick up an advocate and it'll push its way through committees and ultimately make its way to the governor's desk. But without legislative mandate at statute level, the department cannot act on this. And I should make clear that the advisory board that members of the advisory board, like the department, cannot lobby on legislation. Individual advisory board members may lobby the Texas legislature as individuals on their own behalf or on behalf of their employee, company, organization if allowed, or if a member of an association. However, they cannot lobby in their capacity as advisory board members. So I watched the last advisory board meeting and kind of transcribed the inquiries that led to this discussion. I hope that this presentation has answered those questions, but if you have any additional questions, please let me know. I'm hearing none. I guess hate to be the bearer of bad news, but I guess we can move on to the next agenda item. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. I think that's just helpful when licensees ask about it. I think there are a lot of licensees who are very supportive of the concept, especially we have military families, other people who are very interested. So it's always odd if they ask and we say it's good to know that the agency can't act without the legislature. A statutory change. So.
And Sherry, can you hear me now?
Yes.
I'm sorry, this is Shauna. Chris, yes, I do remember that discussion from the last advisory board meeting, and I do believe that covered the inquiry very well. So thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Up next, Angelica, do we have any work group assignments or tasks that need to be assigned to a work group?
So I just wanted to bring up I'll leave this up to you and also Dr. Montanez. Since Dr. Camp is no longer on the board, we have a spot open under the enforcement work group. So if Dr. Montanez is happy to take that spot, we can make this quick and just add her on there.
Yes, I'm happy to do that.
Perfect. The only other discussion is if everyone is okay with their work groups currently. And what I can do is I can send our current work groups to the board members after the meeting and y'all can review, see if you want to stay on there, if you want to change, and then I can get with Sherry and see if we want to move anybody. But for sure, we'll go ahead and add Dr. Montanez to the enforcement work group.
Okay, that's great. And then just watch for the email from Angelica if you'd like to with a different group. So the next item is agenda items for our next board meeting. So board members or staff, do you guys know of some topics that we need to be sure get covered in the next meeting? Things that maybe you wanted to talk about today, but we can't discuss something that doesn't appear on the agenda. So for next meeting, any big topics?
I don't know. I was sorry. This is Ana Montanez. So when I was reading through some of the minutes and the documents that were attached, I saw a possible discussion or a thought that was brought up about student loan forgiveness for the students as they got their finished and completed their degrees. And I mean, I don't know exactly how that works. I'm a big fan of that, obviously, having had student loans for medical school and having the ability to have them forgiven with work hours in an underserved area or, the need for service that is unique to my skill, which I think students of language, speech language pathology, and audiology have a certain skill set and very well trained in. I think I'm a pediatrician, and so I think with a lot of the rise in neurodiversity diagnoses that requires therapy with speech language pathology and assessments by audiologists. Those conditions, although they're rare, when they are diagnosed, it requires a lot of treatment. And the people that tend to not receive that treatment for various reasons are those that are underserved, right? Uninsured and or partially insured, or just not access to care. And encouraging some of these students that in a positive way to treat some of those areas or provide service in some of those areas by rewarding them, if you will, with some of their student loan debt. Now with all of the changes in policy regarding the Department of Education, I think that just seems common sense maybe to consider. But this is my first time on this board meeting. But that was one thing that there are a lot of things that stuck out in those documents, but that was one, and I just wanted to see if we could have some clarification or discussion, or if we could put it on the agenda.
Sherry Cibrian here. So Dr. Montanez, of course, I think everybody on this call would support that. I know historically, I've been teaching this for 42 years now. We used to have some loan support for students. And I know when we brought it up, one of the issues was that, Chris, jump in and help here, but it just may be outside the scope of what this advisory board can do. I certainly would hope that our professional associations or you as individuals might work on that, but I'm not sure that it's something as a regulatory board that we can address. So Chris, what do you think?
Yes, that's correct. We don't have control over the finances, but I assume that, private public student loans are controlled by the federal government generally. And, the state government has little impact on whether those loans can be forgiven. And again, I just to reemphasize, while I certainly encourage members of this board to lobby in their own individual interests or as the member of a professional organization, please, if this is a matter or concern that you feel strongly about, please do not advocate on as a member of the Speech Language Pathology Advisory Board. I think this is I think student loan forgiveness is important for millions of people, and it certainly is something that would be a good use of your time to advocate for whatever position you'd like. But again, the restrictions placed on advisory board advocacy is something that you should keep in mind if you do so.
I have a topic I wanted to bring up. Sorry, Sherry. If we can discuss the human trafficking course that we are required to take. Right now, we are one of the professions that do not get CEU credit for it. And I know several of the other health professions do get CEU credit. Is that something that would be appropriate to discuss?
Yes, that is certainly something we can
if we could discuss that.
Yeah.
And then the other thing is if we could discuss the possibility of that ACAE accreditation, which is accredited by the Council of Academic Accreditation and not the Department of Education, which is another accrediting agency for audiology, and whether or not we need to update our rules to include programs accredited from that within our licensure law. Needs to probably be discussed at a future meeting as well.
Certainly. And that's is that related to the CHEE as well? EEA, excuse me.
Yes. Uh-huh.
Yeah.
We've got, well, it's okay. I know it was probably too late to include in this round draft, but I just wanted it on an agenda for a future, whether it's a rules committee or.
No, certainly. Yeah, no, the sort of accreditation questions are definitely viable for this board's discussion. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So those are my two things that I would like to be included. Thanks.
Yeah, we can definitely add those.
Ms. Jackson, real quick, can you repeat the name of that accreditation? I was trying to write that down.
Well, it's ACAE. Alpha Cat Alpha Education. Yeah.
Thank you.
But they're
Sure, I get-
accredited by the American, well, and I can send details if needed. I believe Chris might already have the details. Great, thanks.
Thank you. Just want to make sure I get that on there. Okay.
Yeah, I believe we've had some correspondence about this. Well, I'll go ahead and send it on to Angelica so we can make sure the agenda item is accurate.
Perfect, thank you.
Great. I know a topic that has been brought to me multiple times is whether this board would entertain supporting speech language pathologists in schools by setting a cap on caseload size. So those of you who've been around a while know all of the issues that are related to that, but it might be good for our licensees to see that it was at least discussed at a meeting so that we could talk about why we can or cannot do that.
And that's cap on caseload size
Cap on caseload size in the public schools.
in public school.
Judica, you want to add to that?
Yeah. Yeah, so this is Judika Mehta, and I would second that, what Sherry just said. We get lots of questions about that. And there are, one of the questions is, there are many, many other states who already have it. Why does Texas not have it? So having that discussion about the pros and cons of it would be great.
Anyone else? Things you've heard from licensees that they questioned you about that we could bring as a discussion for the full board?
There was a couple of questions related to hearing aid dispensing, and not specifically just the audiology, but the secondary rules related to the hearing aid dispensing portion. Would this be appropriate to discuss in this meeting, Chris, or is that a better within a rulemaking committee meeting?
And I don't, without getting into specifics, was this about over-the-counter hearing aid or hearing instruments?
No, a couple of the ones that were brought up to me were notification of locked versus unlocked chips and some things within some rules for hearing aid dispensing and acknowledgement within the hearing aid laws. It may have to be a statutory change. I don't know.
If this is something that, I mean, it sounds like this is something that we probably need to delve in deeper. May I suggest that this item be assigned to, say, a licensing work group, or so
Yeah,
that we
that's
can
fine.
have an offline discussion and then come back to the board with a report, maybe?
Sure. We can bring it up during a work group. That's fine.
Shauna, you're
I'll hold on to it. Yeah, I'll hold on to it until then.
Angelica,
Absolutely.
we just need in the minutes that we schedule a meeting of that work group so Shauna can flesh this out a bit more and know
That'd be
whether
great.
it's something we can bring to the whole board.
I have one. I just don't know how everyone feels about, or if we should have a position at all on the use of AI and any ethical concerns from either patients or other professionals for how AI is used, virtual assistants or virtual therapists, that kind of thing, or just general confidentiality.
So Ms. Andrews,
I mean, I don't know a lot about AI. I just feel like it's everywhere, and
Ms. Andrews, Chris Funderburg, General Counsel. This is actually something that we're discussing with the Behavioral Analysis Advisory Board as well. So yeah, it's definitely a topic that we can bring up. With them, we've been bringing it up in basically a work group that's devoted to the topic of AI. So this is something that the board would like to discuss in further. There's definitely precedent for this. Yes.
Thank you, Sharice. I think that makes sense. Anybody else have a topic you want to put out there, either for our work group or for the full advisory board?
If you think of anything outside the meeting, feel free to email me and I'll make sure that I get that written down as well.
Oh, thanks, Angelica. The next item on our agenda is scheduling the next board meeting, which we don't actually do at this meeting. Angelica will poll everybody. We'll figure out when a board meeting is needed and when we can get a quorum together. So there's nothing left on the agenda. So at this time, I would like to announce the adjournment of our meeting at 11:36. Thank you to everyone for taking time out of your day to be here and participate and speak up on these topics. the board doesn't work without everybody here contributing. So we appreciate that, and all the staff who prepared those reports, and Angelica, who keeps me in line and reminds me what I'm supposed to be doing. So thanks to everybody, and we'll see you next time.